Hello y'all on YouTube, this is Rob with Rob's Nerdy Knives. Today I have a very interesting review impressions of a knife that I had a chance to check out. This is actually a prototype. So when I check out prototypes, I want to be real clear. Prototypes tend to get a little more grace because there are things that are still being changed and could still be changed, right? And so things that I talk about are just my experiences, things that I would recommend maybe for the prototype to consider changing, things that I think are important for a knife for me, and my understanding of maybe the intent of the design, right? And then also I'll talk about maybe some of the things I already know that are going to be changed. So just take that with a grain of salt. I try to be very supportive, but at the same time, you know, there's things that are very critical for me in a knife, for my impression, for my review. And I will be honest about that, you know, and it may not be important to others, and I respect that. You may absolutely disagree with me. You may completely agree with me, you know, and you may think that something that I don't think is as important should be important. That's all cool. You know, that's the whole thing. That's why the knife community is so awesome. There's so many different offerings out there, and there's some knives I do not care for at all that some people have loved. And there's some knives that I love that other people do not care for, and that's okay, right? So if anything, you know, learn, you know, if you watch these videos, you're either doing it because it's entertaining, you're getting a laugh, you absolutely disagree with me and you like to, you know, yell at me, or you find a common thread in some of the things that I happen to say, and it helps you maybe make a decision or give you a different perspective on a knife or a design or something like that. So hopefully that's the case. All that is to say, I am now going to do a review. It's not a full review. It's really more of an impressions of a prototype. So I can't really do a full review. It's just an impressions of this prototype, where I feel like it is, and you know, some things that would really make this, you know, go somewhere else, right? So let's go ahead and get into it. This right here is a knife that came out of Legion Steel. So if you get a chance, the link will be down below for Legion Steel. This is called the Asgeir, or Asgeir, or I'm going to say Asgeir. I think that's the pronunciation. If it was German with the EI, it'd be Asgeir, but I'll say Asgeir. So this is called the Asgeir Solv, which to me is that's a Danish which means it's perhaps Danish. So maybe it's so the real pronunciation would be Asgeir Solv. So det lyder dansk, you know, so jeg snakker dansk. So if it's meant to be Danish, then I will throw a little Danish out there, because actually my first language was Danish. So now that I think about it, so the name Asgeir Solv, it's Asgeir Solv. So which Solv would be silver, I guess. Yeah. So okay, very cool. I'm looking over here at the names and trying to figure out this. And so then you have Svart, Asgeir Svart. Now, normally black in Danish is soot, so I was kind of curious if it's Svat. Maybe that's a different variant of colors. My Danish is 7 years old when I left Denmark, so I have a 7-year-old vocabulary in Danish. So, you know, if there's some advanced words I don't know for black, you know, that's, hey, you know, I was 7 years old when I left. All right, so looking at the knife and just kind of getting some details. This is a prototype of a knife that they're going to be producing. I like a lot of the things on here. So let's talk a little bit about the knife, the manufacturer, and the designer. So the designer is Legion Steel. Those are the ones who actually designed this knife, the company. I believe it's a gentleman and a partner that opened up this. And so that is the designer, and that's the manufacturer. Now, I don't know exactly who the manufacturer is. This feels like it could be Best Tech. It could be Riot. I don't know. It could be somebody else. But there's some things on here that make me think it's one or the other. I couldn't find anywhere who the actual manufacturer is. And sometimes people don't disclose that, and that's fine, right? I think of Quite Carry. You know, people don't really know who's the manufacturer there. I think of EMP by EMP EDC. For a while we didn't know, and then now we do. But you know, some people, that's something they choose to either share or not share. So let's talk about the knife as far as that. That's as far as I know. Now, handle, liner, and scale material. So this is titanium. It has carbon fiber inlays, which are done really well. The carbon fiber inlays on the top here and the back are nice. This one here is it stands out a little bit, and I'm not sure why. Don't know. Again, this is a prototype, so I know how well it feels over here on this area and how well it feels over here on this area. So that's outstanding. This is like different. And I think this has to do with the fact that it's a prototype, right? This seems like this was not quite with the same, you know, control or the same tolerances as this right here was not the same tolerances as this is. This is perfect, right? So, you know, I'm going to look at that as a prototype thing, right? But based on how they did this part and based on how they did this part, it's really beautiful. It reminds me a lot of Riot. It reminds me of my Sharp by Design Evo Typhoon. It really has a very similar look to it. Matter of fact, let me grab that just to kind of compare for you guys so you can see what I'm talking about. There's a very similarity in that carbon fiber, right? And the similarity in the materials. So it makes me think this might be a Riot. But I know it's a prototype because you look at some of the screws, different designs. You know, you can see it's been opened and closed a bit as they're probably working and measuring things, which is all normal. It beautifully chamfered all the way around, this nice rounded. The clip is definitely flexible, goes in and out of the pocket fairly well. I like that. It has some nice roundedness to it, which is great. It's a little rough there, so that could be a pocket shredder. I don't know if that's as important. A lot of people have that, so you know it may not be important to them, but if they do decide that they want to round that a little bit, that would be great. That would make it a little more comfortable and not maybe rip up as much pockets. I will say all the corners around here are really great, even back here. Even for a sharp corner here, it's pretty round. It's not like terribly sharp. Those are all great. It's nicely chamfered here, so those are all fantastic parts about it. The flipper is especially small, and my complaint about that is it's supposed to be a flipper, open and close. There's no other thing. It's exclusive. To get to it, you've got to make sure, one, your hands are not on the lock bar. You cannot have your hand on the lock bar, or it will have a hard time deploying. But the good thing is there are some changes that I already know about. So talking about the open and closing, already it's talking about they're going to enlarge the sharpening choil. So that's going to be a little bit bigger here, which will be nice. Better access to that, right? The second thing they're going to do is they're going to narrow the lock bar. So the lock bar is already pretty wide here, so they're going to cut a significant part of that off, which it makes sense to me because I constantly get my finger on here and it does almost fail this flipping. And because this flipper doesn't have any jimping on here, which I very much would like to see, that is really going to be a problem for some people, right? Now, for some people, you know, if you got small, thin fingers, you know, you may not care. But if you got big, meaty fingers like me, that could get very frustrating if your hand is constantly sliding off and you have no traction up there. And I know I've had that before, and especially if this finger absolutely, you know, you got big meaty fingers, you're going to probably be touching this part back here, and that's going to be enough that you can't get past that detent, right? Because you're going to push that into it. So that'll make the opening and closing a little difficult. The blade steel on this thing here is CPM 20 CV blade steel, so that's cool. And it's stone washed. I like that. That'll make sure it's nicely, it'll, you know, if you use it, you'll get little scratches and stuff. You'll be really covered up well. I like that. I like the blade shape. The blade shape is really, really cool. It's like, they call it a modified sheep's foot. I could see that. It's definitely unique. It's got the belly of a sheep's foot, comes around the top, you know. You could kind of call it, you know, it's a modified sheep's foot, and I think that's perfectly fair. I mean, you know, some people say, well, it's a reverse modified sheep's foot, Tonto, whatever. I don't care. Modified sheepfoot makes perfect sense to me, but it's unique, and I like that. It's very thin, which is something I've not seen before. Typically, they tend to be bigger bellied, right? So this makes me think more of a Warncliffe, but so it's like a Warncliffe sheepfoot modified sort of thing. It's got a beautiful swedge. I like that too. That gives it a unique property, the swedge, for nice turning and cuts and stuff. So the you know, 20 CV blade steel, that's awesome. I don't know what the Rockwell hardness is on here. I hope it's, you know, at least 60, 61. So that would be really, really cool. All right, so that is the blade steel. All right, so how it opens and closes, it's a flipper. And we already talked about that. I wish there was more jimping on here. Without that jimping, you easily can slip off, especially if your finger gets stuck over here. Now, we already talked about this is going to be moved away. And there is a little part that does hook and catch you right there. And they talk about that. They're going to remove that portion from the handle. That's really smart because that does catch you and it's really uncomfortable. And then they talk about this lengthening the flipper tab. Lengthen the flipper tab and remove the rounded surface. Oh, yes, sorry, I just read that. So they're going to remove the rounded surface and lengthen the flipper tab. That is perfect. That is perfect. Yes. Okay, so now that I look at this, that would be this part right here. Okay, so they're going to move that, lengthen it, and they're going to do that. Outstanding, outstanding. Now the only with that, it's going to be much easier to deploy, right? The problem is you won't be able to choke up like you can here. Before, you'll have this. I have large hands, so you have about, this works for large hands, extra large, double extra large, you're going to be over the edge and you're going to lose space. If you choke up, you have more room. If they lengthen this, I don't know how much they're going to lengthen that by. So again, we'd have to see the final spec on there, but I don't know how far out that's going to go. That's something I would definitely want to consider, right? But I like the fact that they're going to take that, get rid of that round, they're going to lengthen it a little bit. I hope the jimping goes all the way out here so you can reach that. Because right now, I get it, it's very hidden, it's very neat like that, but my hand's got to be off of that lock bar, and I really want that jimping to be on there. So I don't know how far out. I don't know if it's going to be a full flipper that you get down, or if they're going to bring it out and that jimping is just going to come up to the very top. That's what I'm hoping for. I don't know. So very, very cool. I like that. All right, so that's what they're talking about. I don't really see it on here exactly how they're going to lengthen. They're going to lengthen the flipper tab and remove the rounded surface. So yeah, I mean, that means it's going to come out a little bit. That means this is also going to come out a little bit over here. So I don't know, but those are things that I think would make this knife very successful. So based on that, I think this knife could be very, very cool. It is beautifully centered. It fits really well in here. I like that. So. But the lock bar with the flipper, I think those things are huge. Now, there's a couple other things that I think would be really helpful, and we're talking about the materials, right? We talk about the blade steel, we talk about how it opens and closes, and then we want to talk about the lock bar here and the cutout. The cutout is fairly decent to get there, right? So that's nice. It is pretty stiff on the detent, and this is very thin and kind of sharp. So one of the things I would love to see is this to be a little more rounded, or this to be rounded. This edge all across here is pretty sharp, as it is over here. Now I know they're going for a thin design, and I get that, and there is milling in there for good weight relief, even though the carbon fiber is already there, which is going to do other weight relief. So yeah, I mean, they've handled the weight issue really well. But this edge is right here. I really would recommend that this be chamfered, even if it's micro chamfering, right? Just a very, very slight chamfering, just to take the edge, because it's really sharp there. And when I was doing a squeeze test, I could feel that digging into my hand. And especially if you use this knife for any length of time, that kind of sharp edge there is going to really dig in a bit. Especially you can see right there where this is pretty sharp as well. So everything they've done so far, I think is great. Just maybe consider the little chamfering on here. I think that would be outstanding, and I think that would be a big win. So, bigger flipper, smaller lock bar, yes. Get rid of the rounded part, which means I'm assuming that it's either going to have jimping on it, or it's going to stick out far enough where you can get some good traction leverage where you're not going to slide off. So, outstanding. I like that. I love the blade shape. I really, really, really like the blade shape. I think that is so unique and very cool, and I dig that. I dig that a lot. I just want to make sure all the other aesthetics complement such a cool design, right? So those are my only thoughts. Oh yeah, there was another thing right here. So it does have a titanium mill clip. We talked about that. It's got good flexibility. It's nice and thin. All that's great. I love the design on there. It's cool. It's unique. It's not your standard run-of-the-mill kind of clip, but it's a little pokey right there. Just a little pokey there. And if you're going to do a blue anodized kind of clip, make sure that that's nice and rounded, because otherwise make sure it's plain titanium so people can round that off reasonably, because that's too sharp. That's too sharp for me. I could feel it. I could feel it in my hand. I could feel it when I was pulling it. It's that's going to be edges here and the tip here, I think would really, really knock this one out of the park. The tip and these edges. So once they do that, that's the opening and closing about the knife that I would say, and the cutaway would be a little easier to access and a little more comfortable. Now, with the longer flipper, you want to make sure that you have enough, this goes down where you can clear the detent ball. See, when I hit this, I'm still on the detent ball here. I've got to get all the way down here for the detent ball, and if I clear here, it's going to drop and guillotine my finger. I don't want it to guillotine my finger. So just another thought, if they could just give a little more room down here so that you can be here and the flipper can catch there and you can clear the detent ball, you can have a nice drop shot, I think that would be really cool. All right, so those are my those are things I noticed, those are things I would recommend. Again, this is a prototype, so things like that could already be changing, and I don't know that. Maybe they already talked about that and it just they didn't remember. Maybe the final design is going to be, you know, there's other things that like these rough edges. I know in some prototypes I've heard before where those are things that they would always mill out. It'd always be rounded in a prototype because they're just trying to get it out. They didn't go in and do some of the finishes, right? Because that was extra cost in just getting a test prototype out. So that could be absolutely already addressed. I don't know, and that's why I got to say, you know, take this with a grain of salt. It's a prototype. Right? Until I see the final product, I really don't know. And this is their first knife. And so that first knife could be just ridiculously amazing. Right? And, you know, it could have a few things that they need to work on. And we'll see, right? But those are important things to me. I love the backspacer, by the way. Full backspacer with a pin. It's not quite, you know, the blade to handle ratio, they do have a lot of extra over here, but it does have this pin. It's kind of out of the way, so aesthetically I enjoy that more than seeing a big giant hole. So, you know, but it still is kind of a priority way up here, and you're gonna it's gonna be semi-deep. It's not super deep, but it's gonna be up to here, and it'll push in like that, so that's cool. But, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But some people who love lanyards are gonna love that. It's absolutely fantastic. I don't hate it. I don't mind it. It's not terrible, right? It's just, it's not of my priority, right? And this kind of takes a little priority. And I'm always going to say, hey, if I'm totally fine if you do a lanyard that doesn't have a priority. I'm totally fine with that. But I'm going to tell you things I like and things I don't, and that's part of my review. I get to tell you my experiences. You don't have to agree with it. And I have a bug in here. Wonder where that's from. Like a little gnat coming from outside. All right, so you don't have to agree with those experiences necessarily, right? You just, you know, you just take it with a grain of salt. If you love lanyards and you see I talk about it, then you know, hey, this is great. If you don't like lanyards, you can be like, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying, but I'm totally fine with this like this. This is, if you're going to do a lanyard, this is like one of my favorite ways to do the lanyard. It really is. It's so discreet. It's not so big, giant hole, gaping, whatever. It's inside. You didn't change the whole shape and make it uncomfortable. Like I think of Giant Mouse. They make these giant lanyards with sharp edges, and they always dig into my hand. And I get blisters. I've returned 3 Giant Mouse knives because literally just in an opening of a boxes, it dug into my hand. It's like I can't work with that. I can't. So this works fine. This works nice. It's nice and rounded. So good job on that. So that's opening and closing. The lock type, this is a frame lock. It's got a steel bar insert with an over travel stop, which is great. You can see the screws. They're interestingly anodized. It's like a different color inside and outside. I think this, because again, it's a prototype. It's been screwed in, screwed out a few times, so you know they're probably doing some things as they're measuring and doing, probably getting their calibers out, figuring out how much of the lock bar that. I totally see that as perfectly fine, right? Perfectly fine on a prototype. Fully expect it. No big deal. All right, so that is it. Lock type, we talked about it. You know, with the thinner lock bar, I think this is going to be really nice. I think it'll be nice. It'll make this not as strong on the detent. I think that'll be a little more comfortable because it's pretty strong right now, but I think that has a lot to do with the robustness of that lock bar. Let's do some measurements. All right, so let's see how much this guy weighs. So 3.69 ounces, which is phenomenal. That's really, really great. 3.69 ounces with a knife that's relatively big. Let's go ahead and do some measurements on there and see what that relates to the 3.69 ounces. So overall length of this knife, we are just a hair short of 8 inches. We're like at 7 and I want to say 15/16. So it's just 1/16 of an inch shorter than 8, right? We look at the handle right here from the tip right here to there. We've got about 3 3/4 inches. If you take this rounded part, if you just take this part, about 3 1/2. If you were to choke up, you probably have about 4 1/4 inches. Now with the new modification to the flipper, I don't know how far it's going to be, and I don't know if it's still going to allow you to do maybe choke up on the flipper. If it's still going to be flat like that, you know, just come out just enough like they do on the EMP EDC or some of the other ones where they kind of have the very square flipper, but it still has some jimping. I hope that's the case because I'd still love to be able to choke up on this. I hope I don't know. I don't know, but that would be cool. All right, so that's that. Let's look at the blade. The blade from the tip to the base of the knife, we're looking at 3 1/4 inches, which is ironic. It's shorter here, but the actual blade length itself is about 3 and I want to say 3/8 of an inch. So that not under 3 inches. Keep that in mind for wherever you are for your local local laws. All right, so for me to get the measurement, I'm going to have to lay this down. Let me see. Can I get that? Yeah, I can. Okay, let's look at the blade stock thickness on this guy. Now, a lot of this stuff is on their website, but it's always nice to get the measurements here, right? So we're looking at 130 thousandths of an inch, 130 thousandths of an inch, or 0.13 inches. So not super thick, but not super thin. Definitely has a little robustness to it. Does come to a nice thin edge. Seems to be pretty sharp. It looks like, I'm gonna guess, it's a pretty relatively straight edge both sides. Yeah, nothing rolled. That's nice. I do like that. I want to say, it looks to me as thickest, for the thickness of the blade, we're probably talking about a 20 degree, maybe a 22 degree angle edge on there. That's what it looks like. So the geometry is going to be great for cutting and pushing through. I like the swedge. You can definitely be turning with it thinner like that. You can absolutely turn that through cardboard, plastic, or leather. That gives it some very functionality. But if you're going to do that, like I said, these edges, if you're doing that with the swedge, you have a swedge, you're going to be doing that. It means it's going to be rolling in your hand, and these edges are going to be digging into your hand. So either you're going to need gloves, or you're going to need, something so you can handle that and deal with that, right? So that's just something to consider with the particular things about the knife, right? So very cool. Being 3 1/4, the dimensions are almost, talk about ratios, pretty close. It doesn't feel heavy. Let's see, where's the center on this thing? So it's a little far back there, I think with some of the things they talked about, I don't know if that'll make an impact on there or not, but I don't know. Still feels good in the hand. I like that. All right, so purpose, EDC hard use. Well, it could be. The only problem I have with the hard use right now is the flipper tab. I don't know how big it's going to be. I hope it's something that's very easy to work with and not to step on. If that's the case, yeah, I think it could be hard use for a frame lock. Again, if you're going to do stuff that you need a fixed blade for, get a fixed blade. If you're going to be chopping wood, get an axe. But if you're in a life or death situation, it is a frame lock. It does lock in. It does give you a nice secure blade. It's definitely better than a slip joint. It's definitely better than a button lock, so there's those benefits for it. And I think for hard use for what you're going to do, maybe boxes, maybe fertilizer, dog food, cat food, cases of water, yeah, I think so. If it, everyday home hard use, right? So there's hard use, like, are you a Navy SEAL going out and saving people in all parts of the country? And then there's hard use for the 98% of the rest of us, things we do at the house. Maybe we cut open a bag of fertilizer or mulch or whatever. Maybe we open dog food, cat food. Maybe we open litter. Maybe we open cases of water, boxes, Amazon boxes, gifts at Christmas or something. Yeah, I think it's absolutely fine. Is it a collection piece? I think it could be. I think it's unique enough. Some people will find it to be a collection piece. I would love to see the final product on there. It has a unique aesthetic. It's so different, which I think is nice. It's nice to see something different. I love this. To me, this is the first time I've seen this blade shape. If you guys have seen this blade shape before, you let me know, but this is the first time I've seen that type of blade shape, and I think it's really cool. So that has a lot of appeal to me. I guess it could be a collection piece. I don't know if it necessarily is. To me, collection piece tends to be a little higher, but people collect what they collect. But I think this would fall into that, especially the price range, because I think the pre-order for this is like $335. So you're in the range of, like a quiet carry or an EMP EDC kind of knife, right? And I suspect, maybe this is Riot. I don't know. They're not going to say, but it feels like it could be Riot. It can also be really top end, best tech. It doesn't feel QSP for sure. That's definitely, QSP has a different feel to it. So it feels more Riot or Best Tech, and Riot and Best Tech are starting to become more and more indistinguishable in my opinion. All right, so the design overall, we talked a lot about the opening, closing, and the frame lock, and those are things that speak to the design overall. I like the look of the blade. I like the look of the whole knife. It's unique. It's different. It's refreshing, right? So that's cool. I like the design, going for a thin look and all that stuff. I love this blade shape. This blade shape is just so stinking different, so stinking unique, that it's almost like when Rick Hinder did his Spanto, which is the spear point tanto kind of whatever together. I forget, that's what he called it. It's just a unique. It looks like a tanto, but it's not. But it's kind of, but sort of. This is what it reminds me of. This is kind of just that uniqueness, right? I like the handle. I like the look of the handle. So all of those things are cool. I like the fact of the frame lock. That's really cool. I like what it could be. Based on what they said they're going to fix, I think this would be much better. Already it's kind of a nice snappy little thing, right? Because this right here, the very tip, is just above the pivot. So you get some good leverage there once you can get in there and not slip off. Smaller lock bar is going to definitely give you less chance to stick on that, so you're not jumping over that. I think that's a positive. I think getting rid of this little hook bar that makes it a little, that's definitely a consideration. And I hope when they do that, My other thing is just get these edges. Get these edges, especially if you got this beautiful swedge where you're intending to do some work and cut through. I mean, that feels like this knife has a purpose, right? And part of that purpose, you're going to want to, you're going to want to make this not as sharp. Just like this tip, after a while, it's going to dig in. It's going to eventually cause a blister on somebody here. If they're using this knife hard, you're going to have a little digging in. After a while, they're going to get a blister. This is going to cut into the hand, especially if they get wet or slippery or they're doing work. Those are small touches I think would really, really go a long way. So that's my thought. Opening and closing. Opening is pretty cool. Like if based on how it's going to be thinner in the outer here, I still like this. I mean, even though it's really small and it's a prototype, with envisioning what they're going to do, this has a nice snappy deployment. I think it will really be nice once you get a good firm grip on there. You're not going to slide, and you can get this every time. Where it's located and how it's doing, it's kind of cool. Okay, my only thing is about getting over that detent ball, and I'm hoping when they come out that you can clear the detent and catch it further down here, right? So you can clear that detent ball, because if not, you're going to want to cut out a little bit more to get in here, so when it drops, you're past, like here's the detent, you want to be able to get your finger to catch that. It's already, depending on the size of your hand, it could be clear for some people and come down and catch and cut people. And I don't like knives where blades fall on my blades fall on my nail. It's a big turnoff, and I tend to sell those knives if I bought them, or I tend to not buy them because I don't like to get cut there. I have a lot of scars from being cut there, and over the years I've decided I'm not going to be cut there anymore. I refuse to let that happen, right? So the way I refuse to let that happen is I don't buy things that do it. So, and if I have them, I sell them. So I hope that's a consideration. But I'm just sharing my thoughts. They could take my review and say, this guy's an idiot. Totally throw him out, blow him off, right? And not care. And I respect that. I'm just some little guy who's had knives for a few years and loves knives, and I'm nerdy. I'm very analytical, but it may not be what they want, and that's fine. They can choose that. I'm just telling you what it's important to me, and take it or leave it, right? Absolutely can disagree with me. I have no problems with that, by the way. No problems, just so you know. You do not have to agree with me all the time, or even half the time, right? You can absolutely disagree with me all the time. Now, if you disagree with me 100% all the time, I would question that, because no one is always wrong. No one is always right. I mean, short of, I don't know, maybe Hitler, I guess he was always wrong. But there you go, right? So let's just, that seems a little over the top, right? So, all right, fidget factor. The flipper, it's only a flipper, and that's all I expect. I don't see anything else. I don't see any other opportunities. If the flipper comes out and is what I think it's going to be, I think it'll be pretty good. As is right now. I'll tell you what, I'll give you a fidget factor and a fidgety goodness on what it is right now, and then I'll give you a fidget factor estimate and fidgety goodness estimate based on what I think it's going to be, okay? Again, what I think it's going to be is my speculation based on what I saw. So take it with a grain of salt. Right now, I would say the fidgety goodness on this one is probably, you're at a 2. Quite frankly, right here, it's a 2. I always catch that. I slip off. Many times I don't get it. I come in here and I can't get it. My finger slides off. Then it hurts my finger. It's uncomfortable when I slide off. That to me is just, ugh. And then so the fidgety, I gave it a 2. And out of that 2, executing it, it's like a 65. It's a D, right? So if you had left it like this, it would be a big dismal failure. Now, based on what they're saying they're going to do, right, with the lock bar and that together, I think the fidgety goodness, they could get this up to probably a 4. Now, I don't know. It could be a 5. It could be a 6. I mean, maybe they get the sheer Goroff kind of flipper goodness that happens, right? Because sheer Goroff does that, like that little nub thing. They do it so good, right? And so they get a 6 from me for that. Maybe they'll get up to a 4, maybe even a 5, right? I don't know. But let's say best case scenario, let's say 5. So I'm assuming it's going to be probably between a 4 and a 5. That's what I'm going to expect. Now, out of that, with the lock bar and everything, it's probably going to be an 85 to 90. That's, again, my estimate. It could be 100. But based on what I saw, I think it'd be realistic to expect a 4 or 5 out of fidgety goodness, capability, or fidget factor scale would be 4, and out of the fidgety goodness, I think it'd be reasonable to get a B+ to an A-, right? That's what I think it's going to be. I could be wrong. It could be worse. It may not be great. It could also be better. Again, I would love to get a production version once they're done to compare that, because, this could become the next best thing to slice bread, right? So that is overall thoughts. Is it recommended? Well, I don't recommend really prototypes. Okay, I did it before, and when I thought about it, I did one knife that was a prototype, and I didn't like doing that. Honestly, I didn't like doing that. It was a prototype, and I felt it just was not what I wanted. I don't like to recommend it for prototypes. Maybe, realistically, I think, what's my overall final thoughts on a prototype? I think it has the potential to become something really special. It really does. This is what I'm going to say. It is, do I think it has the potential to be something special, or do I think it's something that I'll probably pass on? I think it has the potential to be something special. That's what I think, based on what they're talking about. But it's real close to almost being something I would pass on. If they were to consider my couple of recommendations, and they may not, like I said, I'm nobody, right? But if they consider these edges, maybe consider, and maybe we'll find out. Maybe they were already considered, and they just wasn't disclosed because that was just a basic thing that they knew in manufacturing would be taken care of, and it didn't think it was important. But based on my first experience and not knowing the whole manufacturing process, I can tell you this is my experience. Maybe they already knew they were going to get rid of the sharp corner on the pivot, and if that's true, then very cool, very cool. Then I think that would become absolutely something special, and I think it'll be a really cool knife. I personally probably won't get it on the pre-order just because it as is right now. I don't know if it's the knife that I would really want to get in. It doesn't jump out at me. The blade shape is totally cool, but it doesn't pull me in like some other knives does at this point, right? I'll be quite honest with you. EMP EDC, the Nimble, didn't really ever pull me in. And then when I finally saw a variant of it, I'm like, okay, I got into it and I saw people talking about it. I was very interested. And then I did buy one. And I was a little disappointed because the flipper part always caught on my nail and it didn't clear and cut my nail. And so it was very frustrating. Then he came out with the Relative. Oh my gosh. Now, everyone loves the Nimble, and I'm probably in the very small percentage that doesn't like the Nimble because I got big meaty fingers. I get it. But the Relative is one of my absolute favorite knives. And it's still in contention for Knife of the Year, to be honest. It still is. And I enjoyed that. If there's some other way you can get past that flipper and not get caught on my thumb so I can still drop it and not have the blade hit my nail or cut my finger, I think it would be awesome. But right now, the Nimble, the way it is super popular, but it's not my favorite. But the Relative is ridiculous. So I bring all that up to say, I think, this thing could be all that. It's just, I need to see the final production run. I would like to see and experience it. I'm not big enough that I'll probably get one of those knives. It'll probably go to some big giant knife channel like, Metal Complex or Neves Knives or Stasa and all those guys, right? I'm a lefty. I'm a little guy. I'm a little nobody, and so I get that. And the only way I probably get to experience that if one of my awesome subscribers were to send me one of theirs that they bought, and it would be very cool to see that. It would be very interested to see that. So I would love to know a little bit more about that. So that is my honest review with what I know, what I know right now. And if the folks at Legion Steel happen to see this review and happen to comment and maybe even pay attention to it, feel free to comment down below if I've missed some things that I didn't know about. Maybe I just didn't know some things you're going to do. Maybe there's some things you felt like it wasn't that important. Maybe you felt like, what I thought was important didn't really matter to you and to all the other people that you spoke to. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I respect that. I mean, I know the aesthetics of things I like, and I talk openly and honestly about them, but I will tell you, I really like the blade shape. I think it's just so distinct. And it's something I hope you consider other designs with, right? Just kind of cool. So I'll just leave you at that. All right, that is my review, my impressions. That's what I'm going to say is, I won't say if it's recommended or not. It's not going to be that. It's a prototype. It's not going to be my recommended knives because I don't recommend prototypes until I know what the final product is. I think that's unfair. And I can't recommend it, and I can't recommend against it. I can tell you is, do I think it's going to be spectacular and something I want to get in on, or will it be something I'll pass? I think with what I know and the changes they're going to make, I think it's going to be something I would want to get in on. But I still have to see it, right? It's not so much so that I want to pre-order it, but it's enough that I would love to get in on it, right? There are very few knives. So truth be told, everybody knows who watches this channel for a while, I'm not a big pre-order guy. I don't like pre-ordering, period. I don't like pre-ordering. I typically don't pre-order. I pre-ordered once, and I was on a pre-order wait list for 14 months, and that totally burned me. And I have gotten in on one pre-order since, and it was because I got a prototype that was just out of the gate was rock solid. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. And the one thing that I had an issue with, they had already told me ahead of time, boom, we fixed that. This is what we're doing. And I had only issue with one problem, and it was a really cheap budget knife, right? I mean, not cheap, but it was less expensive. It wasn't under $100, but it wasn't over $300. So it was in what I call the regular knife realm. It was like in the low 130s, 140s, 150s, which to me is a pretty good range to be into, and it had a lot of positives, had a lot of unique things, and it was also kind of a fun, ridiculous knife. And it was the crispy donut community knife, and I ordered that, but here's the thing. It was only like 2 or 3 months out that I have to wait. So it should be coming in the near future, right? It should be coming any moment. I can handle that. I can't handle 6 months. I can handle a year. I can't. Technically, you talk more than 3 months, I'm like, no. You talk 6 months, I'm not even a thought. Okay, you talk a year, never, right? I don't do those types of pre-orders. That's just, I can't get in on it. I get that's how some people are able to do some of their really cool designs. I just don't have the funds to do stuff like that. I don't have the ability to tie up cash like that. You know, maybe someday in my life I'll be getting in on all the pre-orders because I have a lot of extra cash. I just don't have it. I'm trying to grow the channel. I'm trying to do things, and I'm very limited on that. So funds have to go in and come out, and you know, knives have to move in, they have to move out. You know, if I buy a knife, I sometimes sell them so I can keep buying more knives, right? I can't have it tied up for that long where I can't get another knife to look at and review and sell, right? So there's that. Or they're knives that I buy and then give away, right? I can't tie up funds like that, especially when they're a little more expensive. So just take that with a grain of salt and understand my perspective on that. So yeah, that's my thoughts. That's my impression. That's kind of how I want to leave this at. I think it's favorable. I think we've definitely talked about some concerns and there's some concerns they've already said they're going to address. I think that's great. I'm super excited about that. There's a few things, like 2 or 3 things that I think if they address that, this knife would be insane. If they don't address that, I think it still has the potential to be pretty great. I think it'll just be I'll just be missing something. You know, I kind of think of, and let me liken this so if anybody wants to give a perspective. There was the Urban EDC LC that they pre-ordered. That was the pre-order that burned me because it was like 14 months to wait for it. But I got it. It was a fantastic knife. Phenomenal in so many ways. I put skiff washers in. Action was great. It had a clip in there that was not rounded. It was very square, and it would rip your pockets. You couldn't get it in and out. And I was about ready to be done with it. And I knew several people who sold theirs as soon as they got it because of that clip. They were not happy about it. Well, I had just got, I have a work sharp belt sharpener, and I'd started trying to mess around with some things. And I took the clip off, and I taped it up, and I rounded the back of it, and guess what? It was phenomenal. It saved that knife and made it fantastic. Matter of fact, I liked it so much, it was a Trevor Burger design. I bought a custom Trevor Burger Urban XL. And when I got that one, the clip was exactly like how I did. Well, not exactly. He obviously did it way better. All right. But let me put it this way. I had the idea of what he was already doing in that knife, which made my knife, the production version, really great. And I wish in the production version they had missed that because I think that really hurt their sales. I honestly think that knife would have sold out and they wouldn't have had a single one left if they'd fixed that. And Urban EDC has a few knives like that where there's some minor things that I think if they were to fix, it would change the radical sales of those knives. They think they're minor, small aesthetic things. Sometimes people are more into what it looks like than the overall feel of the knife. And I can tell you for someone who buys knives and people who collect knives to use and to buy, because a lot of people, this is the range you buy a knife, not just to collect, but to use, right? It's a nicer piece, but it's definitely a user range knife, right? Some people might think, oh, this is a collection piece. No, once you get into knives, this is not the collection piece. That's way above that. But this is a knife of a user. And so what matters is how you use it every day, comfort, fidgety, everything. And if it's not there, yeah, there you go. So this is a very, very long impressions review. I know, but it's because I wanted to be fair. It's a prototype. It really deserved some extra time. If you've stuck this far, you listened this far, you know, thank you. I suspect majority, if not all of you, have already checked out, and I get it, and I respect that. But if you have stuck this far, I appreciate you guys. I really do. I just wanted to be fair. I wanted to be honest, and I wanted to kind of give my impression on this and see where we're at. So thank you. All right. Hey, if you found this content fun, interesting, worthwhile, entertaining, or informative, would you please consider hitting the like button down below? And if you've already hit that like button, would you please consider hitting the subscribe button? Subscribing and liking the videos really helps out the channel. It allows me to do more things, produce more content, basically do more things for you guys. You know, it just helps the channel to grow. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that, especially you guys who subscribe and all my channel members. Thank you, channel members. I appreciate you guys. You help this channel do the things we do. You help me get the giveaways. You allow the channels to do things that otherwise I would not be able to produce the amount of content that I do produce. Honestly, if it wasn't for you guys, you know, we would be a whole lot less, and I wouldn't be getting at least 1-2 videos out every day. I've tried to commit to that for a year, and I'm getting there. And there's times when you run out of stuff, you know, you just can't produce content. You try to come up with stuff, but when you have awesome subscribers like you guys, then I'm able to do that. So thank you. All right. If you found all that cool and you've subscribed, you liked, you're a member, whatever, but you know, if nothing else, maybe consider hitting the notification button so you can be notified of future content like this when it does drop. And then finally, check me out. We'll do it right here. Check me out over on Instagram at robs_nerdy_knives. Again, that's on Instagram at robs_nerdy_knives. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day and a great week. Bye.